Breaking. Tyler Perry is selling the $14 million Montecito mansion tied to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And insiders say it's because they can't pay back a massive loan. What started as friendship has turned into a full-blown financial crisis. Stay tuned. The truth they don't want you to see is about to come out. What began as a private act of generosity inside Hollywood's most exclusive circles has now escalated into a public financial rupture with implications that stretch from Montecito's luxury real estate market to the fragile foundations of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's post-royal life in America. In December 2025, filmmaker and media mogul Tyler Perry made an unusually direct public statement that immediately altered the narrative surrounding the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Speaking during a radio broadcast, Perry stated that the couple owed him a substantial sum of money connected to their Montecito residence and warned that legal action would follow within 30 days if the debt remained unpaid. The remarks, delivered calmly but without ambiguity, triggered a cascade of reactions across Hollywood, Royal Watch communities, and financial circles, particularly after multiple real estate and legal sources confirmed that Perry had begun preparations to place a $14 million Montecito property on the market. The timing of Perry's announcement and the near simultaneous movement surrounding the property has fueled intense scrutiny, not only because of the sums involved, but because of what the dispute suggests about the financial realities behind the Sussexes' carefully managed public image. Since their departure from official royal duties, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been presented as independent media entrepreneurs, liberated from palace constraints and sustained by lucrative commercial agreements. Yet the unfolding situation suggests a far more precarious reality, one in which private loans, delayed repayments, and strained personal relationships may have quietly underwritten their American transition. Multiple individuals with direct knowledge of the situation say Perry's involvement with the Sussexes began in early 2020, during a period of uncertainty marked by security concerns, housing instability, and rapidly escalating costs. At the time, Perry allegedly offered temporary housing and security support, a gesture widely interpreted as an act of solidarity during a volatile moment. Publicly, the relationship was framed as a friendship rooted in mutual respect. Privately, according to people familiar with the arrangements, the assistance expanded as the couple's stay in California lengthened and their expenses multiplied. What had initially been short-term support gradually transformed into a structured financial arrangement tied to long-term housing, culminating in the Montecito property that would later be showcased as the cornerstone of the Sussexes' new life. By the time the mansion became a regular feature in media coverage, insiders say the financial framework behind it was already under strain. The property carried not only a multi-million-dollar valuation, but also substantial ongoing costs, including security operations, staff salaries, insurance, maintenance, and professional services tied to legal and public relations management. Several financial advisors who were briefed on the household's expenses describe a scenario in which fixed costs consistently outpaced reliable incoming revenue. While high-profile deals with streaming platforms were announced with significant publicity, payment structures were reportedly staggered, performance-dependent, and subject to renegotiation. As revenue timelines shifted, reliance on private financing increased. According to 3 independent sources familiar with the loan arrangement involving Perry, repayment schedules were revised more than once as anticipated income failed to arrive on schedule. By late 2023, communications regarding repayment had become irregular, and by early 2025, those communications had deteriorated further. Individuals close to the negotiations say proposed repayment plans stalled, partial payments failed to materialize, and repeated attempts to resolve the matter privately were unsuccessful. It was during this period, sources say, that Perry's legal and financial advisors began urging him to take formal steps to protect his interests. The decision to move towards selling the Montecito property appears to have been influenced by both financial and strategic considerations. Real estate professionals tracking the luxury market in Santa Barbara County note that properties in the $10 million-plus range have faced increasing resistance from buyers amid broader economic uncertainty. Listing the property sooner rather than later could allow Perry to preserve value and recover capital without engaging in prolonged litigation that might expose private contracts and financial records. According to brokers familiar with the situation, preliminary evaluations of the property were conducted weeks before Perry's radio remarks, suggesting that the public warning was not spontaneous, but part of a coordinated escalation after private negotiations failed. As the story gained traction, attention quickly turned to the absence of a response from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. In situations involving documented financial disputes and potential asset sales, silence can be interpreted in multiple ways. But public relations specialists say it carries risks, particularly for figures whose brand depends heavily on transparency and moral authority. Unlike disputes involving anonymous sources or tabloid speculation, this situation involves a named lender, a tangible asset, and the explicit possibility of court proceedings. Former palace communications staffers note that without the institutional buffers of royal infrastructure, the Sussexes face a legal environment governed entirely by private law, where financial arrangements can be compelled into public view. Beyond the immediate dispute, the situation has prompted renewed examination of the broader Sussex business model. Since leaving the royal family, the couple has relied on a combination of media production, speaking engagements, and brand partnerships to sustain their lifestyle. However, several of these ventures have underperformed or ended prematurely, while expenses related to security, litigation, and reputation management have remained high. Financial analysts describe the resulting imbalance as unsustainable over the long term, particularly when compounded by reliance on private loans rather than liquid assets. Perhaps the most consequential aspect of the unfolding dispute is the apparent breakdown of what had been presented as a deeply personal alliance. Perry was not merely a financier, but a public supporter who defended the Sussexes during periods of intense criticism and aligned himself closely with their narrative of resilience and reinvention. Associates of Perry describe his decision to go public not as an act of hostility, but as a final measure taken after all private avenues were exhausted. They emphasize that Perry is known for resolving disputes quietly, and that public escalation typically signals a belief that contractual obligations will not otherwise be honored. As the 30-day repayment window outlined by Perry approaches, legal experts say the next steps could include formal claims related to breach of contract or asset recovery. Such proceedings could compel disclosure of financial arrangements that have remained opaque since the Sussexes' relocation to the United States, potentially reshaping public understanding of their financial independence. For now, the listing preparations for the Montecito property stand as the most visible indication that the dispute has moved beyond personal disappointment into a decisive effort to recover losses. What emerges from this developing situation is a portrait far removed from the polished narrative of effortless success. Instead, it suggests a complex web of financial dependencies, delayed expectations, and strained relationships that has remained largely hidden from public view. As Perry moves forwards with plans that could permanently sever his financial ties to the Sussexes, the consequences may extend well beyond the sale of a single property, raising fundamental questions about the sustainability of their American life and the true cost of their independence. As preparations to sell the Montecito property quietly advanced, legal and financial experts began to focus less on the house itself and more on what a formal dispute between Tyler Perry and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex could expose if it moved into a courtroom. According to attorneys familiar with high-value private lending disputes, litigation in this case would almost certainly require disclosure of contracts, repayment schedules, communications, and financial representations made at the time the loan was structured. Such disclosures, while routine in commercial disputes, would be highly unusual for public figures whose post-royal identity has been built around claims of financial independence and ethical transparency. Multiple legal sources indicate that Perry's advisors have already outlined a strategy that prioritizes asset recovery while minimizing reputational damage. Selling the Montecito property represents the least intrusive option, allowing Perry to recoup capital without compelling testimony or document production. However, if the sale fails to satisfy the outstanding obligation, or if the Sussexes contest the terms publicly or legally, escalation would be unavoidable. In that scenario, court filings could reveal not only the size of the debt, but the broader financial architecture supporting the couple's lifestyle since their departure from the United Kingdom. Financial analysts who have reviewed partial summaries of the Sussexes' post-royal income streams describe a pattern of volatility rather than stability. While headline figures associated with streaming deals created the impression of vast wealth, those agreements were reportedly milestone-based, subject to performance metrics, and vulnerable to cancellation. When projects underperformed or failed to materialize, anticipated revenue evaporated while fixed expenses remained. Security alone, according to industry estimates, represents one of the largest recurring costs borne privately by any former member of the royal family, and those costs are largely non-negotiable. Several individuals familiar with the Sussexes' financial planning say that by 2024, reliance on private financing had expanded beyond a single arrangement. While no other lenders have been publicly named, insiders describe a network of deferred obligations, professional credits, and informal financial bridges that allowed the household to function despite inconsistent cash flow. In that context, Perry's loan was not an isolated gesture, but part of a broader pattern in which future earnings were used to justify present spending. When those earnings failed to materialize as projected, relationships that had been built on trust began to fracture. Hollywood reaction to Perry's public warning has been muted but significant. Within entertainment circles, the incident is widely interpreted as a signal that the Sussexes' reputation as reliable partners has deteriorated. Producers and financiers are acutely sensitive to disputes involving unpaid obligations, particularly when they involve individuals known for discretion and financial discipline. One senior executive at a major media company, speaking on condition of anonymity, described the situation as radioactive, noting that even unproven allegations of financial mismanagement can chill future deals. The personal dimension of the dispute has also drawn scrutiny. Perry's role in the Sussexes' early American period was portrayed as foundational, offering not only material support, but emotional validation at a moment when the couple felt isolated and embattled. That relationship, sources say, created expectations on both sides that were never fully reconciled. As financial pressures mounted, the imbalance between public solidarity and private frustration grew increasingly stark. By the time Perry spoke publicly, associates say, he no longer believed the issue could be resolved quietly. Public relations specialists note that the Sussexes now face a narrowing set of options. A swift repayment could neutralize the immediate crisis, but would raise questions about why the debt was allowed to linger, contesting the claim risks prolonging the story and inviting deeper investigation. Continued silence, while sometimes effective against speculative reporting, is far less effective when the dispute involves a named creditor and a visible asset transaction. Each day without clarification allows the narrative of financial distress to solidify. Royal historians and commentators have also begun to reassess the broader symbolism of the Montecito situation. The property was not merely a residence, but a statement of autonomy, a tangible rejection of royal dependency. Its potential sale under pressure from a private lender undermines that symbolism, reframing the Sussexes' American chapter as one marked by substitution rather than independence, replacing palace support with private patronage. In that sense, the dispute resonates beyond celebrity finance, touching on the unresolved contradictions at the heart of the couple's public story. If the matter proceeds to litigation, the consequences could extend further still. Court-mandated disclosures could intersect with other ongoing legal and contractual matters involving the Sussexes, creating a cumulative effect that reshapes how partners, audiences, and institutions perceive them. Legal scholars point out that once financial credibility is questioned in one venue, it often reverberates across others, particularly for individuals whose income depends on trust, reputation, and narrative authority. For Tyler Perry, the outcome appears more straightforward. Regardless of whether recovery comes through sale or settlement, associates say he is prepared to absorb reputational fallout in exchange for finality. His willingness to speak publicly suggests confidence in his position and a belief that documentation supports his claims. In Hollywood terms, that confidence carries weight, especially given Perry's history of avoiding public disputes. As of now, no court filings have been made public, and no formal listing has been announced. but the convergence of legal preparation and real estate activity indicates that the dispute has reached an irreversible stage. What was once a private arrangement grounded in trust has transformed into a test of accountability, with implications that may linger long after the Montecito property changes hands. Taken together, the developments outlined in this report suggest that the sale of a $14 million mansion is not the story's conclusion, but its catalyst. The deeper issue is whether the Sussexes' post-royal experiment can withstand sustained financial scrutiny without the institutional protections they left behind. As private debts surface and former allies draw boundaries, the couple faces a reckoning that could redefine not only their finances, but their public identity in America.